Today I'm going to start reading from one of my YA novels, Running. This is the cover. It was drawn by Amy Hibbard, and she's drawn the earthquake that destroys San Francisco and the Silicon Valley. And she's also put in it the motorbike, which is the hero of the book. It's a Suzuki 1000cc. I've been thinking for about 3 years what I should write, and this is way back in about 2008. And when I went to get my golf trolley fixed one day at the local garage, I stopped to talk to a young man who'd got a motorbike, and it was a Suzuki 1000cc, and it was blue and white. And he told me all about his adventures, and it was the most beautiful bike. And when I came out of the garage 30 minutes later, I knew who the hero of Running would be, and that was the motorbike. I'd only ever once ridden on a motorbike, fast one, but according to my cousin who rides motorbikes all the time, it was a pretty good description. As I said, I'm going to start reading chapter by chapter the novel Running. A most strange thing has occurred. I wrote this book in 2009. It was published in 2010. Now all of a sudden it's got very popular again, and I can't quite understand why, unless it's coming true. It was a futuristic thriller with Europe as top dog and England as an island off the coast of Europe. Sounds familiar? Gets better. We've got America ostracised by the rest of the world because they've blown up Iran. Have you seen what's going on today with America sending warships to Iran? And we've got a computer virus that's so powerful it can creep into any computer anywhere and steal its secrets. Familiar again? Yes, I think so. And an earthquake. We had to have an earthquake. The San Andreas Fault in California has been very unstable for many years. Every so often it erupts, and I recently saw a movie about an eruption of the San Andreas Fault, which destroys all of Silicon Valley, where all the computers are made and where all the computer moguls live. That's what I've done, but I did it in 2009, and it's all in this book. And I got an awfully nasty feeling that it might, just one day, come true. So here we go. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. The prologue. Simultaneously, mobiles rang in every corner of the world. The trapped and dying reaching out for a lifeline, as if a miracle of modern technology could rescue them. Last words of love and desperation soared into the air, with radio masts quivering under a deluge of calls. Within seconds, the besieged towers were screaming no network coverage to the millions who, witnessing the disaster live on television, heedlessly keyed in the number of anyone that might be caught up in the quake, even now wiping out the Californian coastline. The skyscraper, which 5 minutes before had been central to a vast hotel complex, nosedived into the ground. The resulting tremor catapulted the camera sideways so that, to the people staring at the screen, it was as if they were standing on their heads. Blackness followed, then silence. The calm voice of the anchorman trying to reassure viewers they would be back at the scene momentarily. In London, the cab driver, chatting amiably with his passenger and ignorant of the unfolding drama, had one eye on traffic, which appeared to be fast backing up, and one eye on his mirror, nodding in agreement to the various subjects offered up for discussion. It's a long time since I was in England, the man said, the faintest trace of an American accent marking his voice. That was when the cab driver began to wonder if his fare could be a film star. Even features, excellent teeth, not an ounce of extra flesh, with a thatch of light brown hair tipped blonde by the sun, and steel blue eyes of a shade that only ever belonged to Americans. The mobile in the American's jacket pocket rang. "Excuse me," he said. "Sweetheart, where are you calling from? Everything okay?" Since mobiles were designed only to be heard by the person into whose ear they were pressed, the cab driver couldn't hear the terrified syllables speeding across the saturated airwaves. He could only watch with astonishment as his passenger's face turned into a mask of dangerous impotence. "They told us we had to work for them to stay alive." The whispered words flew across the Atlantic. "But they tricked us. Can you hear it? The earthquake." "What are you talking about? Who tricked you?" "The Styrus project. They want it. We said no." "Who, God damn it? Who?" There was a blur of static, then the line cleared. "There's no way out." "Yes, there is," the man snapped. "There's always a way out. Find it." "That's me. That's what you hear. Me, running. But it's hopeless. Charlie's dead. So's James. It's impossible. We're trapped." "Try, goddammit. If someone's after you, they won't let you be killed. You're too valuable. And if they can get in, you can get out. Stay alive. Do you hear?" The pleasant quality of the man's voice had vanished, his tone vicious, as if it could force a reaction thousands of miles away. The mobile crackled, the words becoming staccato. "There's no way. Can't make it. Sky! Sky! Keep him safe. The building, it's toppling. Sky! Safety!" "You're not checking out on me. Crawl if you have to, but you don't dare check out," the passenger yelled into the static. The cab driver watched in a state of near panic. Whatever had happened, his passenger's face was now chalk white under its tan, his expression animal-like in its ferocity, his eyes glinting as he swiftly keyed in a number, speaking briefly. "Get me back to Grosvenor House, fast," he snapped, his eyes fixed on a small screen in his mobile where newsreaders crowded to report events. The cabbie stuck his arm straight out of the window and, heedless of the vehicle bearing down on them, swung the cab round, saluting the driver's blast on the horn with 2 fingers. Grosvenor House came into view and he swung the cab along the apron in front of the hotel and stopped. "Wait!" His passenger took the hotel steps in a single bound. "Get me on the next flight to New York," he snapped to the bell captain, scarcely hesitating in his path to the front desk. 10 minutes later he reappeared, clutching a small valise. The cabbie, who had considered jettisoning his lucrative fare and fleeing the scene, convinced he was carrying a knife-wielding maniac, obligingly pulled back into the traffic. There had been no lack of volunteers in the cab rank, eager to update him on the disaster even now taking place in California. He viewed his passenger with careful sympathy. Someone belonging to the American was caught up in the earthquake. That much was evident. He fished around for something to say but found nothing. He didn't know the bloke, and sorry was an empty, meaningless word, trotted out when you bumped into someone. Instead, he cursed the traffic and urged his cab forward, one eye on the crowd of onlookers that had spilled onto the roadway outside Debenhams. Ignorant to the danger, they had their gaze fixed on the television sets in the shop window display, where live footage of the disaster was being transmitted. "Son of a bitch," his passenger cursed, "the vacuous pleasures of the petty-minded who derive their kicks from someone else's misfortune." "That's not fair, Gov," the cab driver rebuked him. "The English don't celebrate tragedy. Those people watching, they'll be putting their hands in their pockets tomorrow to help." "I know," the passenger said, his tone bleak. "Excuse me." Look, Gov, I can't help much, but I can drop you by a tube station. You'll reach the airport quicker that way. It's not fair to take your money. He pulled into the side of the road, opposite the entrance to the underground at Oxford Circus. Good luck, sir. Who was it? He said. The traditional inner core of reserve, so great a power of being English, battling with his cabbie's nose for entertaining titbits to pass on to his next fare. My wife. The man pressed a £20 note into the cabbie's hand. He glanced up briefly, meeting the concern in the driver's eyes. Only my wife. At dawn the following morning, a rental car made its way down narrow, dust-filled tracks that wound across the slopes of the Sierras. The driver knuckled his eyes. He felt bone-weary, but thank God he had at least made it. If the call had not got through, if the taxi driver had been lazy or greedy and withheld information about travelling on the subway, if he had missed his connection in New York, he would now be stranded. The rental car stereo, his only companion, had kept him abreast of the news, and less than 6 hours after he reached New York, the President had declared a state of emergency, closing every airport on the continent. By then, he was landing in Las Vegas. Nothing now moved in the skies unless by order of the federal government. Beyond that, nothing had happened. The lessons learned from the tragedy of New Orleans, too far distant to be remembered. In any case, it had been a double whammy. Participants at meetings hastily convened to set up a rescue operation with help for survivors had awakened to find their decisions literally wiped out, as a deadly wave submerged the battered coastline in the dead of night, sealing the fate of those who had somehow survived the earthquake. To the American, driving through the night, the horrific details of the tsunami constantly tore holes in his belief that his wife had somehow survived. Nevertheless, each time he stopped for coffee, he punched in numbers on his speed dial, praying someone, somewhere would have news, only to be met with silence. The couple waiting for him, out on their porch, had no news either. They only knew what the television had relayed and prayed their son had something more hopeful. In their 60s, with white hair, they continued vigorous and upright, the husband still carrying the firm muscle of a sportsman, his clear grey eyes watching the distant track as the car appeared through a cloud of dust. The disaster hadn't reached them, high in the hills above Sacramento, but the slopes a mile below were thronged with battered survivors, many still in their nightwear. Anxious residents had opened their doors and ransacked closets for clothes and shoes, handing out water and blankets, all the time desperately searching the skies for some sign the government cared. The man pulled the Chevy to a halt and got out, his face grey with fatigue. Any news? A unified shake of the head spoke volumes as to the length of time the couple had been married. The older man put a gentle arm around the young man's shoulders, escorting him onto the porch, his expression carefully non-committal. We were hoping you had something, son, but it was not to be. Seems like it was totaled all the way to San Francisco. Sacramento escaped the water, but it's raining refugees. Lord know when help's coming. Seems like our government got itself frozen. Come in, lad. You need food and sleep. Any strangers? The man said, looking around. No, son, you're safe. You only got here with help. How can anyone else? From the sky, the man thought. From the sky. But he didn't offer up the words. They had enough to worry about. No point adding more. He rubbed his eyes. You're right. I need sleep, but straight after that we must all leave. His father nodded. We've already packed up. We'll go up to my cabin. No one can find that. Wish you'd come too. He held up his hands, backing away. Yeah, I know we discussed it. You have to get out of the States. But that's not going to be so easy as you think, he added. There's lockdown on the roads. Nothing's moving. and the only things flying belong to the federal government, and there's a chronic shortage there too. I expect the crate put paid to state government, but I guess you'll find a way. The food appeared to revive him, his blanched cheeks resuming a normal tanned appearance, although the deep black smudges under his eyes remained. He got up and went into the back room where there were 2 beds, stripping off his shirt. A smile lifted the lines of fatigue on his face as he stared down at the bed where a small child was sleeping. The 4 men that deplaned from the Learjet a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon were young, in their late 20s. The jet, which had landed them at the airport 50 miles east of Sacramento, was of military design, sporting the crest of the federal government, the men's combat gear only serving to confirm their status. A few mechanics sat idly. With all planes grounded, they were unemployed, although a few had stayed on, feeling the need for human companionship in the face of what was happening on their doorstep. The majority had left in the rush to check their family weren't among the victims. The handful now remaining concentrated alternatively on their mobiles and the larger TV screen in their restroom, endlessly chewing over events. They eagerly inspected the 4 men, hoping they were the vanguard of a rescue mission. But what could 4 men do when newsreaders were crunching numbers like 1 million dead? Still, at least their appearance spelled movement. The door to the office opened abruptly, slamming shut behind a bespectacled clerk waving a slip of paper. He trotted out over the tarmac towards the party, bending slightly as the slipstream of the Learjet hit him. "Is there a Lieutenant Devoy?" The officer, his shoulders sporting the stripes of a lieutenant, swung round. "Davois," he snapped. "Message for you, sir. Came through 10 minutes ago." The lieutenant took the slip of paper, scanning its message. "Your ride's waiting, sir," the clerk said, stating the obvious. An army chopper, which had already been sent to collect the 4 men, already parked near one of the sheds, its engines idle. The officer crossed to the helicopter, speaking briefly to the pilot. A couple of mechanics, who had been checking its rotor blades, heard the heavily accented voice, but didn't bother with it, so used to Mexicans and their broken English. He returned to the little group. "The address has just come through. Our pilot says he knows the place we want. It's about an half-hour ride." To the watching mechanics, the lieutenant and 2 of the 3 men came across exactly as they were meant to look. Regulation. Their carriage upright as if a 25-mile run was no more than a gentle stroll. All the frame of the lieutenant would pile on fat in middle life, a half-inch of spare flesh already showing above his belt. The 4th man, his words lost in a roar of noise as the chopper's engines burst into life, appeared an unlikely sort of soldier. Bone-thin and rangy, he gave the impression rather of long days spent in the saddle, with walking a painful necessity rather than a pleasure. Shouldering his kit bag, he moved out slowly towards the chopper, followed by the other 3. The engines cut back, making it possible to be heard. The soldier, his reflective lenses leaving his face a blank canvas, lacking expression, tossed his bag up into the cabin floor. "Hope it's not a wild goose chase." "Where else would he go?" said the lieutenant. "Pity about his wife." "They found her body yet?" "The wave put paid to that, but we have to find the husband." "I'm not expecting any bother. You 2. He called to the 2 men, already strapping themselves in for the ride. "If he's not there, you 2 have got the job of asking his parents where he is." The 2 men grinned, saying nothing. Preparations for leaving were almost complete when they heard the chopper. The man stared at the moving silhouette. "How long?" 20 minutes tops, said his father. "You sure about this?" A Harley-Davidson stood ready to go, the open doors of the outhouse sheltering it from view. The man adjusted his goggles. "Can't afford to take chances, Dad, you know that." I filled the panniers full of food and clothes, but I don't like it, his mother said tearfully. It's running away. I'm sure they won't hurt us. For God's sake, woman, snapped her husband. If they're responsible for 1 million people dying, they're hardly going to lose sleep over 2 more. His son put an arm round her, giving her a hug. Dad's right, Mum. I'll phone when it's safe, but you know I won't be back. Not yet, anyway. She slipped back into the house, immediately reappearing with a heavy rucksack, only the top of the child's head showing. She strapped it firmly to the man's back. That's the best I can do, she said. Promise me. Her son smiled briefly and touched her cheek. I'll buy something more comfortable. Go slow, the older man warned. 5 minutes and you're gone. Clear? We're gone now. I'm not stupid, boy. Mother, go and get your bag. Leave the door open. But if they find it locked, they'll kick it in. Don't come back, Dad. Teach your grandmother to suck eggs. I wasn't a Marine for nothing. A brief smile flicked across the younger man's face. It's not a good day, son, his father said. But I've survived worse and will survive this. I can promise you that. The couple, linking arms, watched sadly as the Harley-Davidson disappeared with a cloud of noise and dust, its rider returning the way he had come. Taking a final look at the dust-blown track down which their son and grandchild had vanished, they climbed into the heavily laden rental car, its rear bumper now decorated with branches, trailing the ground behind it. The ex-Marine turned the ignition and leisurely, as if he had all the time in the world, moved out along the track, the densely packed leaves sweeping the roadway clear of all tyre tracks. I hope you enjoyed it. Join me next time for Chapter 1. Goodbye.